Principles and Practice in Second Language Acquisition by Stephen Krashen. This will be an in depth review and analysis of Krashen's work, his theories. It's not only the comprehensible input hypothesis, it's way more than that. Most people just watch some YouTube video on it and they think they know everything about it. But there are five main theories that Krashen produced and that we'll talk about here. The acquisition learning hypothesis, the monitor hypothesis, natural order hypothesis, the input hypothesis, and the affective filter hypothesis. Let's start with the acquisition learning hypothesis. So, according to Krashen, the acquisition learning hypothesis. So basically, there's a difference between acquisition and learning. Acquisition is unconscious, like when children learn through exposure and interaction. So by listening, watching, and imitating. Learning, which is conscious study, grammar rules, all that exercises. And Krashen argues that ac- learning doesn't really work and that we learn through acquisition, not learning. Let's see. So there are several problems with this. One of them, and there have been many people, I'll put the links below. There are many people who've criticized Krashen's hypothesis, and I agree with this. The argument here is that there's no clear distinction between acquisition and learning because and I get this in the comments all the time. Angry Krashen fans who are telling me that what I'm doing is actually input and that's acquisition. And okay, so where does one end and where does the other one begin? Because if okay, let's say breathing is acquisition, or listening or watching videos is acquisition. What about learning lists of sentences for specific grammar through reading and listening and then repeating aloud? Is that acquisition? I guess, but then again, we're working on specific skills. So there's a very blurry line there. That's one of the problems. But the biggest problem, and I've done a lot of reading on this, is that nowhere, like there's no in any of the papers, there's no real data. It's just anecdotal evidence. It's been observed that immigrant kids in the U.S. learn faster when they watch a lot of television, and this it's always things like that. This never we think something like we had this group and like group A and group B, and group A did 200 hours of inputs only, and group B did 200 hours, amount of hours of whatever else, and and they had the exact same level in the beginning, and these are the results. There's nothing like that. It's just observation and immigrant kids in the U.S. It's usually something about immigrant kids, but you know, at, at, at this is a point where just the amount of exposure is going to be decisive, right? So you can't really claim that just being exposed to the language is better because kids who are exposed way more improve faster. Obviously, more exposure is better. Doesn't mean that it's like if you make an apples to apples comparison, like same amount of hours, is it actually better? There's no data of that. It's just more exposure is better. Oh, yeah, obviously. Anyway, next, no feedback, and this is a big one. Any kind of neuroscientist, modern stuff. Not this is Krashen theories are from the 70s and 80s. They will tell you that errors and feedback are essential to improve. If you watch videos or read the work of Carl Newport or Andrew Huberman, listen to his podcast, read his stuff, one of the best ways to learn is making a lot of mistakes. Try, make a mistake, get immediate feedback, you try again. This is frustrating. It's not exactly pleasant, but and that's one of the reasons why people avoid it. But making a mistake, getting feedback, and then trying again and getting it right the next time is much more time efficient for learning. And also, it's active, and that's the last part. Speaking is an active. It's a motor skill. Speaking is something that we physically do. I'm using my mouth right now. Yeah, a lot of muscles in my mouth, my tongue, everything. It's not only about knowing the grammar and knowing the words. And if you're simply watching or listening or reading, you're just doing that passively. You're not working. You're not developing muscle memory. You're not working your motor skills. Speaking is a skill. It's a physical skill, and a lot of people will argue that speaking languages are something that's it's a natural thing that humans do. It's not like learning uh, any other skill. But I strongly disagree because speaking speaking is learned. Speaking it's not something humans prehistoric humans weren't speaking at some point. They learned to speak. We learned to speak. And there are many other motor skills that are less complex and less evolved than speaking that humans were doing long before speaking. Running, climbing trees or whatever they were. Yeah, they lived in trees back in the day. Back in the day, like millions of years ago. Throwing, fighting, but mostly running, throwing, and fighting. But there are lots of others. I could argue swimming as well. Eventually, they learned to swim. All those things we've been doing them forever, and they're motor skills, and they're much less sophisticated than speaking theoretically. Although if you ask a high level coach, maybe they tell you otherwise. But all those things, anyone who's good at all those things will tell you that yeah, anyone can run and anyone can throw stuff and anyone can fight and anyone can climb a tree or climb, do things like that. Anyone can try to swim on their own just within a practice. But you can get much better, much faster at all those things with deliberate practice and feedback and learning from the best. Speaking is the same. In fact, speaking is even more advanced. So it requires more deliberate practice and feedback, in my opinion. Next, the monitor hypothesis. And this is where I agree with Krashen that the monitor hypothesis is very simple. It's basically there's, there's this so everything you acquire, so you get in your vocab, you through inputs or whatever, you learn it, and then whenever you try to use it, you try to speak, you have this part of your brain whether that's consciously trying to trying to analyze what you're trying to say and focusing on error correction and focusing on using the rules correctly. So basically, you acquire all this stuff, and then through the monitor, you use it in speaking, and the monitor makes sure that you're using it the right way. Conditions for effective use: the speaker must know the rule they want to apply. They must have time to think about and apply the rule. They must be focused on accuracy, not fluency. So, and then limitations. Over reliance on the monitor can inhibit fluency. It's focusing too much on accuracy can slow down communication. So, yeah, you need to know the rules to be able to use them efficiently, and then you need to have time to think, and this is important. and you must be focused on accuracy and not fluency. And the limitations are that this will slow you down, and this is true. If you get all those people that haven't spoken enough and mostly have learned languages, just have learned the grammar and vocabulary with grammar exercises, they don't really struggle to speak. Many people because they try to think way too much instead of speaking. Now, this is where this is something I agree with. This having this, we do have this. I don't know what let's call it monitor. This part of the brain that's thinking of like, am I saying it right? Am I saying it wrong? And in fact, some people just don't do it that much. I guess they don't have the monitor, but they just say whatever and they keep speaking with massive amounts of mistakes forever, no matter how much you correct them. Um, and this is because I guess the monitor is weak or something like that, according to Krashen. But this is one of the one of the problems with inputs only. You don't get you get mistakes that you get fossilized and you keep doing them. You keep making the same mistakes over and over and over, and you don't realize you're making them. So you need to have this monitor, but at the same time, it needs to not slow you down. How? Well, again, it's the right diagnosis, but then wrong prescription. And the problem is there. If you overthink, you will not speak enough. And if you don't think at all, you'll speak maybe a lot, but with lots of mistakes. And you need to find some balance. But just doing just more input is not a solution because input again doesn't address the problem of feedback. There's no if you're not getting feedback, you're not improving. Like I said earlier, speaking is a motor skill, and the way to develop motor skills is muscle memory. Like you develop muscle memory through deliberate practice and feedback. These are the solutions, the optimal solutions I've found. So first of all, you work with complete sentences, not just words. You learn complete sentences. That's why language islands is a really important one for me. It's complete sentences, a list of sentences that are useful and practical for specific situations, and high frequency sentences that you use a lot, and you learn those really well through drilling. Lots of repeating aloud over and over. So then you can say complete sentences, and you don't have the monitor. You don't have to think if that's correct or not because you know the whole sentence and you use those 5, 10, or 20 sentences that you learned for that specific scenario. You can use them with complete confidence, zero thinking. Not you just know the whole sentence instead of having to form the sentence, having to think of the grammar rules and all of that. The way to avoid to bypass that monitor, that part of your brain that's thinking of if the sentence you're forming is correct or not, is massive amounts of practice, lots of drill and develop muscle memory using complete sentences. If you've got a few thousand sentences that you've memorized and that they're useful for those scenarios, you'll be able to use them without having to think. So language islands, shadowing, yeah, lots and lots of repetition. Just listen and repeat over and over and over until you can say them without thinking. And then retrieval practice. You get immediate feedback. You can do this with spreadsheet or flashcards or whatever. This is a way to work on that monitor. Am I saying this right or wrong? Okay, you use translation into the language with feedback to make sure that you just train yourself to think the right way in the language and identify all the mistakes that you're making and to correct them. This is the best way to do that. So, simple rule. This is my advice. Train your speaking skills the same way you train for a sport or learning how to play an instrument. Yeah, speaking in front of people, like having a conversation, that's a match or a concert. And the daily reps you do of retrieval practice, shadowing, complete sentences, practical sentences, hundreds of sentences a day, thousands even. That's the training. And if you do that regularly or every day, ideally, you feel so comfortable when you're talking to people that you will not have that monitor thinking of, or either yeah, you will not speak a lot but with lots of mistakes, or you will not go quiet because you can't, yeah, you can't think fast enough, or you're really not sure of what you're going to say. Just know the sentences and just spit them out without on the correct sentences with good pronunciation. This is a solution that you can't get with input only. Next, natural order. This is this is two things in my opinion. First of all, this is wrong, and it's been proven wrong by a bunch of people already. But basically, yeah, so it's not correct, and also it's just not relevant. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. But anyway, let's analyze it. So, Krashen has the natural order hypothesis. Says that we always learn grammar structures in the same order. Yeah, for example, English, we learn he's running the ing sooner than the s for the third person singular. Not really. No, we don't. It really depends on many. We'll talk about it later, next slide. But yeah, you learn everything, all the grammar structures. Everyone learns them in the same order naturally. Um, and then, yeah, it doesn't matter how you teach stuff. People will learn it exactly the same, or in the exactly the same order. What does this mean for language learning implications? That because you will learn everything in the same order, then we should all roads lead to Rome. You should focus on comprehensible input. Obviously, solution to everything is more input. The problem with this is, well, first of all, there's lots of studies that show that that's not really the case. People learn grammar different ways. Some people learn some pieces of grammar faster than others based on like how educated you are. Like if you're someone who's really intellectual, you learn advanced grammar much more easily than someone who's and maybe even like you might even learn it sooner than basic grammar for some things if you just get exposed to that kind of input for whatever reason. Meanwhile, some people who are not all that literate will really struggle with anything that's even with basic grammar, um, even with a lot of inputs. Often you'll see that a lot. Then it really depends on what your native language is and what the language you're learning is and how similar they are, or if you have learned other languages that are similar. My native language is not Slavic, but because I speak several Slavic languages, learning another Slavic language is super easy. And even if I see advanced grammar structures there the first day, like conditionals and things like that, I'll immediately recognize them, or the past or anything like that, because they look similar. And the same with Romance languages or Germanic languages. Yeah, so it really depends on what languages you already speak. Also, your mental ability. So, do you have a really good memory? Are you really smart? Are you not that smart? This, by the way, your working memory can be improved if you do specific exercises. I highly recommend you do that. If you improve your ability to retain information, you'll have to review them that fewer times, and also your ability to process information faster, like speed reading and things like that. So it'll be easier to understand the first time when you listen fast speech, or you'll be able to read more. Anyway, there are lots of different exercises. It's not only mnemonics. Like doing memory, working on your memory in general is really good for this. Make you remember easier. Really helpful. But yeah, it depends on that. Obviously, someone who I had a guy uh, who just needed to read a bilingual text once, and he'd remember the grammar and the vocab and everything. He was just a genius, not because he didn't even know a language that was similar to Spanish. He was just he's insane. He had an insane ability to retain information because I don't know. He was just super smart and also used to working with texts all the time. So yeah, it really depends on the person, and then also depends on context and goals. Like if you want the language specifically for specific whatever thing, professional goal you have or personal, and whatever context you learn it in, you learn the grammar that's mostly used in those. I remember I learned the passive tense. Nobody uses the passive. It sounds unnatural when you use it in speech, normal speech. It will be done, right? It sounds weird. But in German, I started using it much earlier than often like really basic, other really basic grammar stuff because simply I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is easy. And I just started using it. And then the kind of stuff that I was reading had some passives as well. So yeah, it's again many factors affect in which order you learn stuff, and it's not even that important. Who cares in which order you learn the grammar? It's just you need to learn it all anyway. Just focus on learning more vocab and grammar. Yes, learn it, but does it really matter if you learn like I'm doing or he does first? No, not really. Just you need them all. So focus on learning more instead of the order. Uh, yeah, that sentence in the end. Short, simple sentences will clearly be easier to learn than long and complex ones. Obviously, that's it. Apart from that, just pretty irrelevant this part. Next, the input hypothesis, and this is where most people like this is what most people think about when talking crashing. In fact, this is the only thing they've heard about. I guess it's got several parts. Uh, Comprehensible inputs. Learners acquire language naturally when they are exposed to language that they can mostly understand. Focus on meaning over form. Learners acquire language best when focused on understanding messages, meaning, rather than explicitly learning grammar on language or language rules. Natural acquisition over conscious learning. When learners receive comprehensible input, they naturally acquire grammar structures in an implicit, gradual way without the need for explicit teaching. I plus one must thinking in Spanish there. I plus one. That's the optimal level of challenge. Yeah, so exposure to language slightly above the learner's current level. So current level plus one, say the ideal amount of challenge to encourage progress without overwhelming them. And implications for language learning. Language learning should prioritize comprehensible input rather than focus on grammar drills or rote memorization. This is language YouTube is obsessed with this part. Let's dissect it. So, comprehensible inputs. Yes, it works, but exposure alone does not lead to fluency or accurate use of language in when producing language. That's my conclusion, and that's the conclusion of well anything written post Krashen that people don't pay attention to simply because what Krashen says is the it's what they want to believe, and we'll come back to that later. Like, I think people want to believe in this more than having actual empirical evidence of anything. They want to believe that the best way is to watch videos and read. Focus on meaning over form. Problems. Yes, when understanding, focusing on meaning is good. When speaking, if you focus only on meaning over form, you get fossilized errors. What does that mean? You keep making the same mistakes over and over forever. You need feedback, and you need to pay attention. You need you need focus on what you're doing, and you need attention to detail. This is why you get a lot of people move to a country and they can speak and they can make themselves understood, but even after decades of living there, they keep making the same mistakes because they've only focused on meaning over form. So yes, focus on meaning and also focus on form. You need both. Next, natural acquisition over conscious learning. And conscious learning and feedback play important roles in language acquisition. Feedback is extremely important, and attention to detail is also important, especially if you want to reach a higher level, especially when producing language. Yeah, for output, you need feedback and you need conscious learning. You need to make sure that what you're saying is correct. I plus one, optimal level of challenge, several problems as well. Okay, theoretically you could do it and you can do it, but it's going to A, be very slow. B, you either someone feeds you an assimil type of course where you at the inputs. Assimil is pretty good actually. When they keep giving you slightly more difficult inputs every time. But apart from that, it's very hard to keep track of to know where exactly you are and therefore what exactly you need. Like what exactly is a little bit harder than your current level. And again, extremely slow, really really slow, and it will keep you stuck at the beginner level and later also stuck at the intermediate level for a very long time watching videos or reading short stories of things that you wouldn't normally watch or things that you wouldn't normally listen to. Where does this skip the last part? Yeah. Yeah. So what I recommend instead is yeah, jump into authentic, interesting content, real life content, podcasts, books, whatever, as soon as possible. But to do that, in order to do that, you have to either go through hundreds or thousands of hours of this boring beginner stuff, or you work really hard at first. You front load the hard work and you learn all the important grammar and vocab fast, and then you jump straight to actually interesting content. So this is my conclusion here. Input is necessary but not sufficient on its own. Yes, it helps, but by itself, it's going to be slow and inefficient and not good enough for speaking. With input alone, progress is slow, and development of speaking fluency and accuracy is limited, very limited. You will be able to speak some if you do. If you get thousands of hours of input, you'll be able to say some things, but again, you'll have the monitor thing, and you'll improve way faster if you actually work on your speaking. Next, and the last, I think, the affective filter hypothesis. What is this? Effective filter is something that's like the monitor affects your learning. No, in fact, monitor affects your speaking, this affects your learning. But basically, this is something that can make your learning less effective if you have any of these problems. This is not all that groundbreaking. If you're not motivated, obviously you will not try as hard and you will not improve as much. You know, it's nothing revolutionary there. High anxiety can block the intake of comprehensible input, hindering language acquisition. We'll talk about that later. Uh, if you're anxious, you're not as effective as learning. Kind of, but not necessarily. I'll explain it later. And then self-esteem. Learners with low self-esteem may be less willing to take risks and participate in language learning activities. I guess this mostly refers to speaking. And I mostly agree with this. So Motivation, yeah, obviously, if you're motivated, you work harder, you focus better, and you learn faster than someone who's not motivated. Anxiety, modern research shows that anxiety is not always bad. It can be bad if it's too high, but also moderate levels of anxiety can be good because you are. I don't know if any of you have competed in sports, but if you are that nervousness or before giving an important talk in front of people or something, that level of nervousness where it's not too much to handle, but you are like alert and ready, and that's also good. Can also be good, that level of anxiety. So like, mid level of anxiety is good, too much, not good. Self esteem. Obviously, if you have really high self esteem and you think you're great and you're smart and or you're positive and you think you know you're gonna get it done, you can do it. Obviously, you're gonna do way better than someone who's like, "Oh, I'm so bad at this." Blah, blah, blah. So again, that last part. But yeah, discipline. Discipline compensates for everything. If you have any of these problems, if you have motivation issues, if you some super neurotic person that has high anxiety and you feel terrible, you get really stressed about learning or doing anything, or you have really low self-esteem, discipline will eventually fix everything. Because if you have the discipline to stay consistent, you have your plan and you learn every day, no matter how bad you feel, no matter how lazy you don't feel like doing it, you have a terrible day, your self-esteem, whatever, you still do it, eventually you'll start seeing results. And seeing results will fix all of these problems because eventually, not instantly, but the more results, first of all, just having the discipline and getting it done despite not wanting to do it will already be like it will feel like a win, even if you don't see the results instantly. You'll feel like a win. So the next day you will be a little less anxious, a little bit more motivated, and your self-esteem will be slightly better because you already did it once. You showed up yesterday. So it'll get easier to keep going. And once you have been doing it for a while, and this, by the way, applies to working out or anything really, but also language learning. Like you want to learn an hour every day, and you sit down and you do your hour of learning every day, no matter what. In a few weeks, you notice that you have learned quite a lot, and it just gets easy because you now you feel good. It's improving. It's basically Goggins your way into getting motivated and having high self-esteem and low anxiety. If you know you can get things done and you are constantly getting things done and you're seeing results, there's no way you won't be okay. Something really bad could happen in your life or personal life or something like that. But most of these issues will be solved, especially self-esteem. If you know if you got results, like if you got, like I say, the irrefutable proof of your competence, you got results, you know you can do it. And you think of yourself as someone who gets results and someone who's a winner and gets things done. And it'll just be easy and even enjoyable to keep learning. So all of this, yeah, the affective filter, yeah, I agree. It can affect your learning, all of this stuff. But the best way to fix it is to get going and be disciplined. And if you keep going long enough, all these problems will solve themselves. Or will just get out. Uh, They'll maybe not go away 100%, but you very quickly reduce it to almost nothing if you are disciplined and you do the work. So do the work. Next, we have uh, how language learning should look like, what it should look like according to Krashen, like how it should be. There should be a lot of comprehensible input, of course. Input is slightly challenging but understandable. Authentic materials, engaging activities, low anxiety environment, create comfortable and supportive environment where learners feel safe to take risks and make mistakes. So basically, lots of input, and then yeah, low anxiety environment, so don't put pressure on people, and focus on communication. This is, by the way, advice for teachers, and I don't think it's that bad. This is not what this is definitely way better than what they do in schools. If they did this in school with English back in the day when we were kids, probably everyone in my class or everyone here would speak good English. If you do this for long enough, it will work. Again, if you do it for 5 years, 10 years, it will work. Yeah, if you have kids watch videos and then just talk in English in class for a few years, yeah, even if it's a couple hours a week of classes, it will work. But what I do is not for kids, and it's not the goal here is not to learn in it's not to be able to have a conversation in 5 to 10 years. The goal is to get fluent as fast as possible. And this is if that's the goal, this doesn't work. This it just this is not good enough. So this is what I suggest instead. So first, treat speaking like a physical, like a motor skill, something that you need to practice deliberately, and you need feedback. But you need to develop muscle memory. You need to train for it, like an athlete. Then you also need lots of feedback. You need lots and lots of feedback. Like I said earlier, watch Huberman stuff, listen to his stuff, read his stuff, Carl Newport as well, and yeah, neuroscience. Make mistakes, get feedback. Try again, make fewer mistakes, get feedback. Try again, make even fewer mistakes and more feedback until you get everything right. It's very hard work, but much more time efficient. Making mistakes triggers neuroplasticity. I'm not an expert in all this stuff, but that's what I've read from those people, and that's how you learn. The brain releases dopamine when we successfully correct mistakes. So once you make a mistake, and then you get feedback, so you get that triggers neuroplasticity, so you're learning. Maybe the next time you get it right, so then releases dopamine, so you feel great, and then keep going. And you can practice this, like Krashen says, in a low stress environment, not just talking to people, because that's why you just move to the country and talk to people, bro. Is not good advice for basically anyone. But this is one of the reasons. If you try to learn by talking to people, you only use the stuff that you're very comfortable with. But if you practice in a low stress environment, if you if you sit in front of your computer or on your phone with your flashcards and you do retrieval practice, you translate into the language that you're learning, and you make mistakes, but nobody cares because you at home alone. So you can make as many mistakes as possible. It doesn't matter. Like you get it. Just every mistake should be. You should embrace the mistakes. Be glad that you're making them, and then you get in the feedback. Next time, you probably make fewer mistakes, and eventually you'll say it all relatively error free. And if you have been doing the previous part, the deliberate practice, lots of reps, things like shadowing, training it like a skill, you do fine when you're talking to people because you've been trained. You've done tens of thousands of reps, sentences that you've repeated aloud, and then you've been troubleshooting your language, your sentences to find and correct the mistakes with no stress, just at home on your own. No one's judging you. No one's looking at you weird. Honestly, like, no one will care anyway if you I talk to people from day one. I don't care anymore. I used to. I don't care anymore, and it just doesn't matter. Like you make lots of mistakes, whatever. But if you are self-conscious about that, just do this at home. Just talk to yourself a lot. lots of shadowing, lots of retrieval practice until you speak relatively error free. When you get 9 out of 10 sentences correct, like no mistakes or very few mistakes, you just feel like you can talk to people just fine. Not you won't be stressed by it. Finally, input. Yes, comprehensible input is great. I like reading books and watching YouTubers and listening to podcasts and all sorts of interesting stuff about countries. And I highly recommend you do this. By the way, once you know enough and you understand enough, just learn about whatever countries you want to travel to. Just read a bunch of books about them. Listen to podcasters from those countries. What's going on there? You get inform yourself about the country and the culture, and that's good. Like, I love doing all that. But targeted input first for faster results. That's why I use the not as interesting but much more efficient sentence lists. So the one that includes all the grammar and vocabulary, so the most common 10, 20,000 words are there and all the grammar, and you read and listen to that list like 20 times, start to finish, and you know everything. Especially if you also do some retrieval practice with it, or you shadow it. And also a second list with thousands of sentences specifically for conversation. Those are the ones that you need for speaking. But you do this first, and once you know at least 10,000 words and your grammar's good, then you can start doing natural inputs. That's really interesting, and you can just keep improving that way without getting frustrated. Because if you just try to listen to authentic input when your vocabulary is very limited, it'll be very frustrating. Because if you don't, even if you understand 8 words out of 10, because you know the most common words, then if there are 2 words out of 10 that are the context specific that you don't know, you will not understand, because those words were key to understand the context. So yeah, you need massive amounts of vocab, and you can learn it through input only, but it'd be extremely slow. So if you do focus input first, you can learn in a few dozen hours. You can learn what you'd learn in many hundreds of hours of more random input. So do that first, and then jump to natural input. That's my advice. So conclusion: Krashen's theories. Honestly, this is something that I expected, but it was way worse than I expected. It just there's no data, no serious. There's no numbers there. It's just it's been observed in immigrant kids and things like that. There's no just anecdotal evidence. There was no studies of we took this many people, we divided into groups, and we gave group A just comprehensible input for 100 hours, and group B just grammar exercise. There's nothing like that. It's just mostly assumptions and observation. And I've heard from this colleague that, and teachers from this school tell me that it's that kind of stuff only. Then, theoretician, not a practitioner. Complete lack of understanding of how physical skills work, and speaking is physical in a big part. Of course, you need to know grammar and vocab, enough of it to be able to speak, but it's also a physical, it's a motor skill that you need to develop muscle memory for, and you need to practice, and you need feedback. And anyone who's any kind of sport, seriously, or any kind of rock climbing, you know dancing, music, anything like that, you know what's that thing that rappers do on the floor? well, spinning around the floor. Yeah, any kind of thing like that. That's actually physical, and you use your body, not just your brain. You don't just have to think. You have to actually use your muscles. Requires actual physical practice. Requires requires muscle memory. Requires deliberate practice and feedback. So yeah, my impression here is that these are all academics that don't really have an idea have of an an accurate idea of how the real world works when it comes to you know real skills. Lastly, yeah, one size fits all solution. Like I said earlier, whatever the problem is, just more input is a solution. This particular one is not something that this is more. This is more something that I get on language YouTube with comprehensible input. When they talk about comprehensible input, that Krashen himself, because he does say that you need some conscious learning and some grammar exercises. That's where you get the money time. But obviously, that should be a small part, he says, and uh, and he also says that then you need a controlled environment, like a safe environment, and you have conversations and all that. But overall, comprehensible input as a solution to everything. It's just unrealistic, and it's very simplistic, and not only it's just a natural order, and a lot of these things is just very very simplistic, one size fits all. This is the way it is for everyone. We all acquire language the same way. He keeps repeating that as well in his videos, and it's just simply not true. That's it. It's very my idea. My feeling with this is that it's something that they first thought of the outcome they wanted, and then they just researched their way into that outcome. So that's why all roads lead to Rome. It's just everything leads to more input is needed because input's the best way because input's the best way. It's a circular uh, logic. That's what I get from this. It's not very serious and not very scientific, in my opinion. But again, I'm not a PhD. Just ask that guy with a beard. The guy with the angry guy.